Today is Wednesday, November the 2nd, 2016. And I saw a video last night that came from John Oliver. Now, if you don't know who John Oliver is, he's a guy that comes from the UK that decides he wants to talk about American politics and social issues for some reason. I'm not really sure why, but he does that on HBO. I think the name of his show is called Last Week or something with John Oliver. But I digress. I'll paste the actual video I'm talking about in the comments below. I don't want to put it here because HBO, they're kind of funny with the way they do content ID and stuff like that.
Our main story tonight concerns racism. You know, the problem that Crash failed to solve.
On Last Week Tonight, John Oliver tackled the issue of racial segregation in schools, which is still a big problem and actually getting worse.
The number of schools where 1% or less of the student population is white has more than doubled in the last 20 years.
That's true. Even as our society has grown more diverse, nearly 7,000 schools have the same racial makeup as the audience of your average Tyler Perry movie.
I just want to get to the core of what the actual video was about. Now, this video was about segregation and how somehow it's immoral, it's improper, it's not a good thing to have in schools. Now, the argument, his chief argument here is that in the civil rights era, when segregation was ended, it was not ended in the correct way. The law that was written back then in the 60s was to say that there should be no legislated segregation, meaning you couldn't have a school that said whites must go here or blacks must go here or blacks cannot go here or whites cannot go there. And the same thing, not just with schools, but with water fountains, bathrooms, etc. That was the whole crux of the law, which I agree with 100%. You know, you shouldn't have a law in the books that says that a certain color of a person must go to this specific place. You know, that's just really just authoritarian rule, and it's really kind of silly. However, I do think you should have freedom of choice. I think you should have the freedom to go wherever you want to go. If you're a black person and you want to go to a school with other black people, that's fine. Matter of fact, I think most black folks agree with that because you still have HBCUs. Now, before anybody gets triggered and say that, oh, we had to have HBCUs, look, it doesn't really matter. The fact is that they're still there, and people, a lot of black folks enjoy the HBCU experience. They enjoy being around people that are just like them. Well, not just like them, but they have common experiences. They have a lot more in common than they do with others at like a predominantly white school. They feel more at home. You know, if they grew up in a mostly black area and they go to a school that's mostly black, they feel more at ease in trying to fit into a new cultural environment with mostly whites or whatever. So I don't see anything wrong with that. And the same thing with white kids. If you want to go to a mostly white school, I don't see what's wrong with that. You want to go to a school that you think is the best for you and it fits you culturally. You know, if you want to go to a school in California or something like that, or Texas or somewhere in small town Virginia, North Carolina, West Virginia, whatever it is, that's fine. You go to where you feel most comfortable and you go to where you feel like you had the best opportunity to get a good education. I don't see what's wrong with that. I don't see anybody really complaining about that, but somehow public schools are, you know, a different animal. I don't really get it. Now, John Oliver, he was talking about how the South was successfully desegregated via the laws because the only reason they're segregated is because of the laws that were on the books. Now, he's saying that a place like New York, liberal New York City, is segregated still. And there needs to be things done to remedy that situation. But here's the thing. New York City is like that because of the neighborhoods. You know, Italians live with Italians, Jews live with Jews, blacks live with blacks, Asians live with Asians. You got Chinese, you got people from India, Koreans. They all kind of live amongst each other. West Indians, Africans, they all live amongst each other because they feel culturally comfortable. It's like, okay, you just came from China and you don't speak any English. You speak in Mandarin. You move into a street that has other people that are in your same situation. You guys work together. You guys live together. You guys socialize, hang out. You all kind of just live amongst each other. Same thing with Hispanics. A lot of Hispanics come over here and they still speak Spanish in the Spanish neighborhood in the U.S. You got Chinatowns, Koreatowns, etc. I don't see what's wrong with that, right? I mean, I really don't understand what's the problem. You have freedom of association. There's not a designated thing that says that Japanese people must go to a Japanese neighborhood or Chinese or African or whatever it is. But John Oliver, what he does not know, what he does not understand. So he comes from the UK. He doesn't really understand American culture or politics or anything like that, or really the history. You know, you coming from the UK, you have a complete different experience. I don't know anything about the UK schools. All I know is that they're not the United States. It's a different system over here. UK is a way different nation. It's an island nation. There's only like 65 million people on it. The United States has 325 million people in a wide variety of different regions, locations. You got temperate. You have like lowlands on the East Coast. You got mountainous regions on the West. You got places where you got a lot of tornadoes, hurricanes, wildfires, or whatever. So it's a different kind of place geographically. Therefore, it's going to be different places, have different kind of, you got New York City, a very dense place with a lot of different neighborhoods that are kind of just chopped up into little pieces with ethnic ties. You got the South where it's like a lot of open space. Even in New York itself, it's different. If you go to Buffalo or Niagara Falls or something like that, it's going to be different than New York City. And the point I'm making here is that John Oliver does not really understand all of those intricate kind of dynamics of the United States. He understands basically what he's being told. I'm pretty sure that his extent of knowledge of the United States education system as it relates to the schools and how they're set up as far as racially is concerned, he pretty much just found that out the day before or early that morning when he went to do the actual show, which is in the description box below. He got prepped by his team and said, okay, you're going to read this. And this is the explanation behind it. They're telling him what to believe and what to think. Or maybe he went to school and they told him about schools over here. Maybe he went to school somewhere in UK and then they told him over there about what happens over here. But that's not really going to be able to get you a real detailed image. You're not really going to understand fully what's going on. Talk to a guy like myself who had two grandparents who are both deceased now, may God rest their soul, who lived in Roanoke, Virginia and were school teachers during the 60s. So they lived through all the integration and busing and stuff like that. And I heard stories straight from them being black teachers on the front lines of the whole situation. And my father was involved with the whole program. And he was talking about his experiences. Now, what I want to talk about is the experience of kids that have gone to segregated schools. John Oliver was talking about how when integration happened, it was this whole big kickback of people that did not want black students to come to their school. But what he did not talk about was how the same thing was true on the other side, but in a different way. See, what he talked about was the whole black victimhood narrative. He talked about how black people were offended, how they were mistreated by white students, how white students had they spray painted on the doors, go home, nigger, go back to Africa, etc. But they don't talk about how all the white students that came to black schools via the busing situation were beat up routinely, robbed and everything else and terrorized. I think it was one situation, I forget the name of the guy, but he was talking about how he would get beat up every day and to the point where he actually like urinated himself or defecated on himself from getting beat up. And he wasn't like a little boy. He wasn't like a small child. He was like, maybe middle school, high school age. He would get beat up all the time to the point where that happened. This is a white kid now being bused to a black school. And Howard Stern, probably the most famous guy of all, who would share his experiences. He talked about how he went to Roosevelt in New York, or he was in Roosevelt in New York, how he get beat up every day, routine, because he was a white kid in a black area, and how he would beg his parents to please move away because he did not want to get beat up every day. He talked about how when King died, they wanted to keep him out of school for a while, because imagine being a white kid, a Jew on top of that, a white Jewish kid in an all-black school where there was racial tension going on, and you just got MLK who just got shot and killed, presumably by a white person. Imagine that. If you're already being beat up every day for being white, imagine how your school experience is going to go after that happens. John Oliver wants to paint one picture, one side of it, which they did have some things happen to a lot of black students. A lot of black students got terrorized in school by white kids that did not want them there. But the same thing was true on the other side. And the reason for that is because what you did with the law, with the forced integration, what you did was just make it to where you changed the law, but you didn't really repeal it. Now, what I mean by that is the crux of the law in the 60s was to get rid of race-based placement. To say, okay, if you're white, you must go here. But all they did was just change it to where you had more blacks and whites together. That's all that happened. Now, in my mind, that's the wrong thing to do. Now, John Oliver wants to go back to that forced integration thing that had disastrous results, which in reality goes against what the law was intended for to begin with, which was to have more freedom to go wherever you want. Now, John Oliver says he's a champion of virtue or whatever he wants to call himself, by saying that you should be able to have more white kids with black kids because white schools do better and white kids they bring more money and more funding. White kids do better than black kids in school or whatever, but that's not even always true. There was a case in Mississippi, in Cleveland, Mississippi, where it's a majority black county, by the way. I did a video on that before. I think even the Young Turks covered it, and I placed their video and also my video in the box below, so you can kind of compare and contrast the coverage between the two, and you can see how a conservative does versus a liberal. But I digress. Now, in this situation, you had two schools in the city or in a small town. One school was half and half, black and white, 50-50, and the other school was 90% black and the rest other races, not just white. Now, they said, I think it was some kind of a district judge or somebody, and I may place her picture and name on the screen before you. She said that was unconstitutional. It went against, the laws or whatever. So she had forced them to integrate. Now you have not two schools anymore, but one school. You force all the kids together, and the purpose was to have the school perform better because, just like John Oliver said, the prevailing thought is that when you have white kids that are put into a school with black kids, the school does better. But that's not always true because, you see, in this case of Cleveland, Mississippi, the 50-50 black and white school was performing worse than the 90% black school. I'll repeat that. That 50-50 black and white school was performing worse than the almost all black school. So people are just meddling from the outside looking in and don't even understand what's going on. And the truth is, just by placing kids together does not make them perform better. I mean, realistically, that same student is going to be the same student wherever they are. It is what it is. Now, you can say you can have better schools. That's a whole different issue. That comes with school choice. But somehow the Democrats say that's not a good thing to do, to have school choice. Why? Because maybe they'll choose to be amongst each other. I'm talking about blacks being with blacks, whites being with whites. See, that is a political thing that undermines the whole thing about school segregation. They don't want to have that. We want to have more white kids with black kids. That's their personal political beliefs. But the truth is, the best way to improve the school system is to have more accountability for the teachers. You got these teachers unions that shield bad teachers to the point where you can't even fire a terrible teacher, someone who has been proven to be ineffective in the classroom. You can't fire them. And then the schools are publicly funded, and then there's no school choice. So if a school is performing poorly, there's no incentive for that school to improve because they're going to get paid regardless. The teachers can't get fired because they'll get paid regardless. The teacher's not able to be fired. So where's the actual incentive to improve? There is none. So just by placing kids into a school forcibly is not going to fix the matter, Mr. Oliver. And I think you would know that if you were not just some UK guy just talking, not really understanding what's going on. Talk to a guy like myself who has experience and who understands the situation rather than just your liberal writers. So that's pretty much all I got. My final thoughts on it are, I think kids should be able to go wherever they want to go within reason. You can't be living in New York City and then want to go to school somewhere in Atlanta. As far as elementary school is concerned, as long as it's within your area, go to wherever you want. And if you are able to go to a private school, you got the money, you're able to get accepted, then do that. That's the way it should be, rather than repealing the law, essentially, because, like I say, in closing, the crux of the law in the 60s to end segregation was to say that the law stating that one color of person must go here and another color cannot go there, that whole thing was done away with. Now, if you want to say that integration must happen by forcibly taking students away from their neighborhood school and placing them in a different neighborhood school to make it more diverse, that is really just going against the whole nature of the law in general. I think that's the wrong thing to do. So what do you think? Do you think I'm on point with my assertion? Do you think that the law should be the way it was supposed to be, that kids should be able to go wherever they want within the school district? It shouldn't be based on color. It should be based on proximity to the school. It should be based on your district, not your skin color, not one way or the other. Not being able to restrict kids from going to a school because of their race and not forcing kids to go to a school because of their race. Or am I incorrect? Should there be forced integration. And my question is, why must that be so? Why must it be so? I think the best thing to do would be to improve the schools wherever kids are, and not just, public school K through 12, but also college. Schools should be improved. Education should be improved in general. So that's pretty much all I got. Whatever your comments are, let me know in the comments below. And that's all I got to say for this video. If you like what you heard, please comment, rate, share, and subscribe. Peace.